Hello. That's my impression of Stalin. Thank you very much for coming out. It's I'm sure you're being inundated with all sorts of films that you have to judge and vote on and consider for awards. And this time next year with this film, I'll be doing the same to you. But this is purely for your, hopefully, pleasure. You don't have to vote, so you don't have to think about which category and which actor. It's this film's coming out. IFC are bringing it out on March the 9th. And it's called The Death of Stalin. Having done Veep for the last 4 or 5 years, I kind of wanted to do something completely different from American politics, get away from American politics as much as possible. So I thought I'd do something about a delusional narcissist who terrifies most of his own country. And in this one, he dies. He doesn't get a clean bill of health from the White House doctor. And I don't want to say too much. We're going to do a little Q&A session at the end, and I can fill you in. It's a comedy, or is it? It is, but it's based on truth. A lot of what happens in the film, believe it or not, is true, and it's set at a time when under Stalin, if your name appeared on a list, if you did or say the wrong thing, your career could be over. Thankfully, those times have gone. But you know, if you appeared on the list, that was it. It was a terrifying time, and we wanted to show the comedy and the reality of what happened then. And at the end, I can tell you, the thing I've been saying to audiences really is, if there's anything in it you think, oh, that sounds true, then we probably made it up. And if you see anything in it you think, there's no way on God's earth that happened, then I can assure you it's true. And without any further ado, sit back and enjoy what we're calling the comedy of terrors, that is The Death of Stalin. And I'll see you later.
On the spirit of democracy, we can take a vote as to whether we do like a formal Q&A or whether I just hang around and if anyone wants to ask me anything outside, we chat about it. What do you reckon? Vote. Q&A. Who's for Q&A? I do. Right, hang on. 1, 2, 3. See, this is how they should have negotiated a shutdown. Okay. So, informal, milling about, and if anyone wants to ask me anything, I'll be around. Oh, right. So undecideds have won. I think I'll mill around, and if anyone wants to ask me anything, then I'll be around. Thank you very much for coming.
I have things to ask you.
Oh yeah, go on.
Go on. I was going to introduce him, but instead of my name is
right.
Riley.
Hi.
So nice to meet you.
Okay.
Well, I actually have several questions, but I actually wanted to start at the beginning.
All right.
Because whenever I'm
like
talking,
some kind of dream.
or nightmare.
Okay.
Whenever I talk to someone as accomplished as you are, I always want to know what your first job was in the business, like the first thing you wrote.
Oh, I was a radio producer.
Right.
Yeah, hosting a hit radio show on Radio Scotland.
Were you ever a DJ?
No. I was mostly bluffing my way through, but I was allowed to write comedy, and that's where I cut my comic teeth. Yeah.
What was your first?
Sorry, who are you?
Janelle Riley. I'm an editor of Variety.
Oh, you're editor of Variety. Okay, right.
I'm a big fan that they let in.
I think IFC didn't pass on a memo.
Don't be alarmed.
They'll be on the list. They'll be on the list. Go on.
No, I really do.
You can go now. This is over. Right, go on.
You are known for putting together these amazing ensembles, and I first want to congratulate you. Veep won the SAG Ensemble Award last night.
I believe we have some of.
You're kidding.
I believe we have our cast here. There he is. Yes, smiling on a low cheer when I woke up this morning and saw that on Twitter.
Can you tell me how this cast kind of came together? Like who you started with? Like did you start with Stalin? Or did you always
this cast, sorry.
Ponsonby?
I got
plenty of Veep questions.
Yeah. Right. So Stalin. Yes. Well, Simon Russell Beale, who plays Beria, right? So Simon Russell Beale is like a huge stage actor in Britain, but not really, doesn't do film, doesn't really do very much television. He looks a bit like Beria. But also I kind of realised that people don't really know who Beria is. And I kind of like the idea of him being played by someone who people don't really know who that is either, but someone really good. So Simon was the first person to be cast. And then you think, okay, who's the complete opposite of Simon, who's very still and contained? Khrushchev is very boisterous and actually slightly Italian. I discussed this with Steve Buscemi. He's actually quite Italian and he talks with his hands all the time. And so Steve Buscemi, who can do comedy and then can turn into, a frightening dictator. And what was interesting was watching Steve in the filming, because of course you film out in sequence, obviously. He's just very subtle gradation as he switches from Khrushchev, the clown in the pajamas at the beginning, to the next dictator telling Stalin's daughter to shut up and get in the car, and and then you gradually work. So who'll be the number three? Who's the kind of the guy who's meant to put up with these two, but is way out of his depth? Jeffrey Tambor, and I was so delighted because Larry Sanders Show is, I think, my favourite all-time TV show.
Did you like Arrested Development?
Oh yeah. But Hank in and I was so pleased when I sent Jeffrey the script and we discussed Malenkov's kind of situation, and he said, I think there's an element of Hank. And I was so pleased. I think Hank's in here because it's that thing of someone who thinks he always number two, thinks he should be number one, realizes I shouldn't be doing this. He doesn't want to say. And again, Jeffrey, as we were filming the late scenes, but again out of sequence, he would hold up the script and he said, I'll do all this, but I wouldn't mind doing one where I say nothing. We said, fine. And actually watching it, you see Malenkov just shrink in the last 15 minutes into the background and keep very still and silent. And, so that's what he brought to that.
An actor wanting less lines?
I know.
That's so cool.
But it says so much.
Yeah.
Less is more. And then gradually, I wanted actors from different acting traditions. So you've got like Jeffrey, who's sort of TV comedy, Steve, obviously, film, and Simon, British stage. You've got Michael Palin, who comes from the whole nice seeing back on the big screen. Andrea Riseborough, who's like a chameleon in every part she does. She's completely different. Rupert Friend, who's just very funny. And I just wanted to because actually I wanted also to replicate the fact that the Soviet Union was a massive empire with different nations, different languages and dialects and accents being, so different acting traditions there. But also I asked them also, we didn't want to do Russian.
Thank you.
Yes. You say thank you, the Russian press.
I've heard they're not happy.
No, they said thank you for not using a Russian accent. We hate that because that for the very slow kind of everybody speaking. You can't do comedy. But as I say, Stalin was Georgian. He wasn't Russian, so he spoke Georgian. Khrushchev was Ukraine. So actually, they spoke in different languages, and so I wanted to replicate that by having different English-American accents.
I thought the Russian press was mad at you.
No. You see, that's fake news.
Just Russia.
That's fake news. No, someone in the world, someone in Russia was mad, and he got on the
One
internet.
guy.
And then someone in the Communist Party. In fact, it's opening in Russia this week, Thursday. It opens in Russia Thursday, and I was told that the press screening a couple of weeks back, the press applauded when Stalin fell on the carpet in the film. I'm being to see how it develops, but I'm not going. I'm sending a collage.
And forgive me for not knowing, but is this your first time doing an adaptation?
Yes, it is actually. Yeah.
When you
So, that's right. Well, this started as a French graphic novel, and it was a production company called a French company. They owned the rights to the novel. They rang me up and said, "We're going to make this into a movie, and we think you should make this." And I read it, and I've been thinking about doing something about a fictional dictator as my next sort of film, sort of contemporary. And this was shot, by the way, summer of 2016. So this was before the event. But things have been. there was a certain 1930s feel to all the nationalist and populist movements around Europe and in Russia and subsequently, you know, in America. And I thought, how about fictional dictation? Then this arrived, and it started with a concert, which is true. That's true. That concert, that happened. Except in real life, they got through 3 conductors, because the first conductor fainted and knocked himself out. We got another conductor in. He was drunk to get the but I thought you could 3 conductors, no one's going to do this. That's true. Stalin fell over. Nobody knocks on his door for all day. That's true. They moved his body. They didn't call a doctor for ages because they were worried they'd call the wrong doctor. That's true. Very important. It's funny putting a tomato in a pocket. Hilarious. Stalin then recovered and pointed at the painting of a girl. You know, his son basically lost the entire national ice hockey team in a face match and then tried to cover it up. It's just, you know, all these things you start uncovering. But what I liked about the book was it started with the concert and then him falling over, and you know, as you see it, and that just draws you into this whole mad world, and it just appealed to me. It touched all the themes I was thinking of, but it's true. So why invent this fiction? You know, when the truth, as we're discovering, you know, comedy cannot outpace the truth these days. So, and I thought that's great. And also there was something I kind of wanted to. Come out of my comfort zone, so not do a sort of contemporary, more contemporary comedy, but also, you know, the themes are, you know, there's horror there, there's sadness, and there's, you know, pain, and I wanted, the challenge was to try and keep the comedy going, but keep the pain going. I wanted to generate this low-level anxiety in the audience all the way through, which comedy kind of helps, because comedy is all about setups and anticipation and the, you know, then the gag. So there's an element of trying to kind of keep you slightly apprehensive even when in comedy. So it was all about trying to balance that and making sure that the comedy didn't dilute the tragedy, and that the tragedy didn't you know, muffle the comedy that actually we were. We discovered in our research that in the 1950s and 1940s, they circulated joke books about Stalin. Yeah. And you could be killed if you told one of these jokes or had one of these jokes books on you. But they sort of felt that laughing at someone is, you know, it proves that they haven't got you. You know, they might lock you up, they might, you know, take away your livelihood, they might take away your family. But if you can still tell a joke about them, then they haven't, you know, they haven't changed up here. So they circulate these joke books, and there are a few jokes from the joke books in there.
Really?
Well, yeah. Don't ask me which ones, because I can't remember. But yeah.
Well, I'm actually curious because I feel like in a time when there is so much, you know, quote unquote fake news, I feel like comedy is really helping people deal with this surreal world we're living in.
I don't know. Is it?
I think it's helping, maybe, but I also think like a lot of the most insightful and, you know, critical stuff is coming from comedians and comedy.
Well, no, I think the comedians who are tackling the present situation are the most successfully are the comedians who are journalists, you know, like John Oliver and Samantha Bee and Seth Meyer. You know, they've got a big team, they've got the resources, they research, they dig out. You know, Trump says this is all fake, so they're saying, okay, well, let's look at the facts. Fact 1, fact 2, fact 3, fact 4, and you laugh at just the sequence of facts that are, you know, put up. I think they're the ones that are having some kind of effect. I mean, whether I always think that comedy can't really change people's political views. No, I don't think so.
My mom was a Republican before she started watching V.
Okay.
Republican for 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, Trump did get in at the height of the
Not a first date,
Peter Cook had this phrase. I mean, he talked about, you know, the wonderful satirical cabaret in Germany in the 1930s that did so much to halt the rise of Hitler. So I think you're hiding nothing. The comedy's going to change. Anyway, yeah.
Do you mind if I ask what kind of shooting schedule you had? Because this is a period piece, giant ensemble.
No, it was tight. It was 6 weeks in London, but we went out to Moscow and we researched, we got the look. We went to the Kremlin, we went to Stalin's dacha, we replicated as much as possible. Great art department, and then a week in Ukraine, in Kiev, for all the street scenes, the old apartments, the riots, the crowds, the trains. That was on given. A couple of days in Moscow, slightly under the wire, filming sort of buildings and so on. So it was a quick schedule. But we also get the cast in early. Tony can testify to this. And we rehearse for 2 weeks in a cheap church hall hired. But I don't know why people spend hours rehearsing on set. The most expensive part of the whole production is the shoot. When we can iron out all those issues with the script and the blocking, a lot of the complicated, the carrying of the body or the lying in guard round the coffin and Steve's boo and all that. We blocked all that out weeks in advance. So you can add those 2 weeks, but they're sort of pure rehearsals. But that's also where the characters. I remember Steve saying this. It helps him not only because you're rehearsing in sequence, getting to know your character's story, but actually you get to know everyone else's character's story. So actually when you're on day one, you feel like you've all been working with each other for years, which they had. I mean, they all did live in those flats all together, and they'd all signed off death warrants for each other's brothers and mothers, and yet all their kids played together, and it was all wonderful, And Stalin built these apartments just across from the Kremlin to put all the top brass in. They thought it was a reward, but it was really so he could get everyone in one building and just bug it and just be able to know what's going on.
What did end up being the most difficult part about making it?
Making it, most difficult part. I think it was really getting that balance, which hopefully we got between the laugh, but also the pain, and that was the edit. It was 4 or 5 months of the edit. It was very quick to get it down to roughly the right length, but actually then 3 or 4 months of just making sure every moment worked with what had gone before it and what had gone after it, so that the mix of the reality and the comedy felt right. And that involved taking funny stuff out, because you felt that tip to the next scene too much into, you didn't quite, and also taking out some much more graphic stuff early on, so that actually the only really graphic bit is at the end, where that's seen in the trial, as it were, which is kind of inspired by various modern day dictators being quickly dispatched in a very messy way, and that's the one bit we didn't rehearse. I just got the cast ready, and I told all the background artists to take instructions from them. And I told them, we're not rehearsing, on you go, there'll be cameras in there, you've got 2 minutes to kill them, go. And just, and it was, yes, it was quite effective. And then, there's time to go back and pick up little pieces. But I said, it doesn't matter if you forget lines, it doesn't matter if you talk over each other. It should just be, bestial. It should be a bunch of animals, really.
I mean, you mentioned you shot this in 2016.
Yes,
how
summer.
Does it feel to be coming out at a time?
Well, that's a strange thing, and everyone seems to think it's about Trump, and
Where would they get that idea?
Trump was just a baby when we were making it. But it is strange because, and in fact, there was a Senator Flake, this week was comparing Trump to Stalin, because Stalin used this phrase, enemy of the people. If you disagreed with Stalin, you were an enemy of the people. So he criminalized opposition. And then Trump did this tweet about NBC and CNN being the enemy of the people. And actually Khrushchev, when he took over, banned the phrase enemy of the people because that was associated too much with Stalin. So he actually banned that phrase. A phrase which in itself was all about lack of freedom of speech, was banned. So you can say that phrase. But and obviously Trump hasn't killed millions yet. But that thing of not being able to take a joke, ringing up Saturday Night Live because they do a bad impression of, and categorizing anyone who doesn't agree with them as an enemy, a sort of treasonous. This thing the other day of saying that the Democrats are responsible now for any death caused by an illegal, it's that. So I find that, and the other thing that sort of inspired I asked my dad used to in the Second World War. My dad was in Italy. He was only about 16, 17. He joined the partisans and fought against Mussolini. And then he emigrated to Britain and and he never took out a British passport, so he never could vote in British elections. And I said, why don't you vote? I mean, you fought for free. He said, voting. The last election I took part in, Mussolini got it. And what he was saying is, democracy, you think democracy is permanent, and once you've got it, it's perfect, it'll never go away, it'll never change. No, you've got to keep monitoring it, you've got to keep, watering it like a plant. You've got to, otherwise it'll just wither. And I sort of was making the film initially thinking it might be quite a good time to kind of make that statement, but now it's come out, it's more a case of, please God, don't let this happen again.
Right.
Really.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions before I go on? I don't want to hog up. Yeah, sure.
Was there any character during your research that kind of got left on the running floor that you wish could have been included?
Any character in my research?
Or just sort of any historical figure that you would have loved
get left behind? I'm not sure. I think we've got them all, the main ones. I mean, the main thing is to find out. Obviously, in real life, there were more people round the table at the end voting on barriers. But you've got to confine it to, a number of people that you can say. In Veep, obviously, the vice president. The president has more people around them on a daily basis than you see in the show, but you can't give them all parts, otherwise it'd just be anarchy. So you group several people in one person. But what we did was we did lots of biographical research on each of those characters, and we gave each of the cast a kind of history of that character and what happened to them. Malenkov, Jeffrey Tambor's character, lived to a ripe old age and ended up running hydroelectric plant in Azerbaijan, for which he won an award for productivity. So that's how. I think that's probably his level. He was probably quite happy, and quite a few of them. Svetlana ended up in America.
Oh, really?
She got out, and she ended up in America, lived till her 80s, but kind of joined a cult and lost a lot of money. And she was a sad character because of clearly the background. Vasily didn't last that long, unfortunately. He was an alcoholic and he died not long after 1953, late 50s.
Did they ever find that ice hockey team?
Oh, I don't know. They might be still been preserved in the ice somewhere. Yeah.
Anyone else? So I want to remind people this actually comes out in America. Is it in March?
March the 9th.
March the 9th.
Yes, just to type the sort of children's field standing rom-com. No, March the 9th, and yes, in Russia next week. And,
Russia gets it before us?
Yes.
Come on.
Yes. We managed to smuggle a microdot of tape under enemy lines. Yeah.
Well, I've been waiting for a movie since In the Loop. Please don't make us wait years again.
No. Yes, no, there's more on the way. Completely different. And I'm about to do an adaptation of David Copperfield, the Dickens novel, Not the Magician. Which we're shooting this summer.
I just got a great idea for a mashup, actually.
Yes. Well,
Who's playing David Copperfield?
Oh, I can't say yet.
Oh, okay. Is it someone in this room?
No.
Well, thank you so much for indulging me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.